All right, here are some example molecules, and let's talk through whether they're an acid or a base. So let's start up here with this molecule. I'll tell you the name after. This, you'll notice, has this C double bond to an oxygen to an OH. That is a carboxylic acid group. It has its hydrogen on it, so this should be an acid. And it is appropriately named propionic acid because there's 3 carbons, so it's a derivative of propane. And it has a carboxylic acid, so we call it propionic acid. Let's go over here. We have a H3PO4. Many acids start with the hydrogen in front. Not all, and not everything that starts with a hydrogen in front is an acid, but it is something to look for. And indeed, in this case, this is phosphoric acid. The phosphate ion is quite stable, and it is possible for this to release up to 3 hydrogens, or 3 H pluses. So it's a pretty good acid. Over here, we have a nitrogen compound. This is called trimethylamine. These are all CH3 groups right here. And you'll notice that it has its lone pair available. Now, when nitrogen has 3 things bound to it, and its lone pair is available, that means that it can act as a base, a Lewis base. So we could put an H plus here, and that would cause it to become the conjugate acid, but in this form, it is a base. Same thing down here, different molecule, but also a base. You'll notice that nitrogen has its lone pair available, and there are 3 bonds to the nitrogen. There's 2 hydrogens and 1 bond to a carbon group. So this is also a base. Let's jump over here for now. This is sodium carbonate, and this is a base. Now, carbonate anion can pick up an H plus to become the hydrogen carbonate ion, or bicarbonate ion. And that could also pick up another proton to actually break apart, or form carbonic acid briefly and then break apart into carbon dioxide and water. But that is the acid-base properties of the carbonate. Let's look here. This is calcium hydroxide. Sometimes when something has an OH and it's an ionic compound, it could be quite basic. So this is a base, and generally a fairly strong one. It doesn't completely dissociate in water, but it will react readily with acids. And the OH is often a good indicator that this might be a base. And then this molecule right here is nitric acid. So it's one of our strong acids, and so it should be easily identified because we've memorized what the strong acids and strong bases are. And this is one of those strong acids. Now I skipped over this. This is isopropyl alcohol. And it actually is neither an acid or a base. It's very unlikely for this proton to disappear from the molecule. It's quite tightly bound. This is a covalent bond here. And if we did remove the hydrogen, it would leave a negative charge only on this oxygen, and that would become quite unstable. And so this is not a good acid. I have a few more examples. We have what's called sodium benzoate right here. This is a common food preservative. It's often in a lot of sodas. There's a benzene ring here, and you'll see that we have almost that same carboxylic acid group right there. But you'll notice that instead of a hydrogen, we have a sodium there, hence the name, sodium benzoate. Well, if we have removed the hydrogen from a carboxylic acid, it will now become a base, the conjugate base. So this particular molecule is a conjugate base of benzoic acid. So remember, we've lost the proton there. Let's look here. This is the triethylamine, but with a proton on it. And you'll notice that in this case, our nitrogen does not have its lone pair available. That lone pair has now been bonded with an H+. So this is a nitrogen compound that is in the conjugate acid form. It's the conjugate acid of this compound without the H+ on there. Now, a couple ways to identify this. We can count up the number of bonds that nitrogen has. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 now because it has a hydrogen on there, and it's positively charged. Those are very good indicators that this is an acid. Now, I put this up here. Now, this is a little different. This is very similar to our isopropyl alcohol, except instead of an H+ or a hydrogen on here, there's a lithium on here, and this is Li+. Now, remember when I said that wasn't a very good acid when the H was there, when it was an alcohol? Well, if we take a hydrogen away from something that didn't originally want to give up a hydrogen, it's going to want it back badly. This is a very highly charged, very focused negative charge right here on the oxygen. It will want that hydrogen back, and so any chance that it has to grab it off of something that could give it a hydrogen, it will. This is a very strong base. Very strong. It is quite dangerous to handle. So this is that's a base. Now, skipping down here, this compound and the one above it right here are very similar to each other. You'll notice that this nitrogen has 4 bonds to it, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a positive charge, and one of those extra things is a hydrogen. And so this is an acid. It's the acid of this compound. Notice how this one is just one hydrogen or one proton different. You'll see that if I add a proton to this, I'll get that molecule right there. A proton being H+. So there's one H+ difference between this conjugate acid and its base. And you'll also notice that there's the lone pair is now on the nitrogen instead of involved in the bonding to the other hydrogen that it's picked up as when it was a base. Coming up here, we'll see that here's a nitrogen that has 3 bonds to it. There's a double bond right there and a single bond right there. And the rest of the molecule really doesn't matter that much in determining whether it's an acid or a base. It does matter when you're determining how strong it is. But since we're just asking, is this an acid or a base, we can do that just by counting up 1, 2, 3 bonds to the nitrogen. It still has its lone pair available for being a Lewis base, so this is a base. Now here's a little trickier molecule. Some of you that have had biology or looked into biochemistry might recognize this as an amino acid. This particular one is glycine. It's the simplest amino acid. And this is actually both an acid and a base. This part of the molecule is the base form. This part is the acid form. And sometimes you'll see this written as the so-called Switzer Ion, where it has, it's actually a neutral overall molecule, but the proton has been located over here on the nitrogen. Here, let's draw that really quickly. So I'll just do that. So overall the molecule is still neutral, but it has a charge separation over it. Now we have a couple more tricky ones right here. This is a metal ion. It's +2 or +3 charge, transition metal ion. And often when they are in an aqueous environment, they will pick up water to be associated with them. And one of the things that will end up doing, because of the high charge on this, the 3+, this can ionize one of the protons in the water away, causing this to become an acid and leaving behind a hydroxide to attach to the iron. And so what you would form is this, which would be the conjugate base for this acid. See here, water first, because so it can do this. It can split off one of the H pluses from one of the waters here and make an acid. And this is not unique to iron. Any of the transition metal elements that are +2 or +3 charge can do this process to varying degrees of ionization. And then I have calcium oxide here. Now, a lot of times metal oxides can form bases in water. And if you react to water with this, this is quite an exothermic reaction, it will make calcium hydroxide, which we've already identified as a base. Just like this. So those were some more examples on what is an acid and what is a base.